We all know that there is a lot of language learning nonsense peddled in the language learning space, and that's why I thought I'd make this video on the top 3 language learning myths to kind of educate you on a little bit of the nonsense that gets passed around so that you can kind of see through it. So the first thing I will talk about is it's a waste of time. There's this idea that language learning is a complete waste of time and that you can't actually either you can't learn a language or it's not particularly useful if you do. And this is 100,000% not true. I don't know why this gets peddled. I guess because it kind of, people feel comfortable hearing it because it means they don't have to invest time into something difficult, but it is absolutely not true. So the benefits of language learning are enormous, aside from acquiring a really cool skill. And obviously people will say, oh, Google Translate exists. Yeah, imagine you didn't speak your native language and you had to talk to your family in Google Translate. That wouldn't go down particularly well. And yes, you don't need to talk to anyone in a foreign language, but if you want to actually travel and experience parts of the world other than the one part that you were coincidentally born in, which I think everyone should, it's hugely beneficial to be able to speak another language, and until you actually do it, you don't realize how much you don't actually know about the world. So I'd highly recommend it on that alone, but we're not even going to talk about the benefits of learning a specific language. I'm just going to talk about the benefits of learning a language overall, particularly for Gen Z or younger people with a worse focus and worse attention span that were kind of stabbed in the back a little bit by the school system in that it kind of didn't really train them how to actually learn things and how to have a growth mindset and how to have proper focus, etc. So a few of the benefits that I personally have noticed, these aren't just things that I've researched, these are things that are true in my case, are your overall intelligence goes up. And the reason for this is when you're constantly learning and consuming content in other languages, not only do you have a better understanding of how languages work and how to learn languages, your ability to learn improves. You learn a bunch of things just by nature of you going out and by nature of you learning stuff, it kind of branches off and you just encounter other things along the way. Like you encounter things about the history of the country, about different people, about geopolitics, because you're learning another country's language, etc. You just learn things overall, and it's super useful. Like I've genuinely noticed that. Another thing it hugely improves is your focus, both macro and micro. So micro focus is just what you think of when I say focus, like your ability to concentrate on something. Doing this kind of low dopamine task where you're not being, constantly bombarded with colors and, images of like social media. It's really, really good for your focus in that you're able to concentrate on quite a difficult task. You're learning completely new information, and that does take a lot of focus. So it's really good training for that. When I said macro focus, I basically mean picking one thing and focusing on it over time and kind of getting rid of other things that are getting in the way. So obviously when you're learning a language, you need to free up some time. Generally, you'll get rid of something that isn't particularly good for you. Maybe you'll watch less social media content, or you'll waste less time effectively because you've got something enjoyable that you're making progress towards. So yeah, it's very good for focus. It's also very good for confidence because you've basically taught yourself that you can do something really difficult that you set yourself, and you're not gonna stop doing it. You're not going to fail. Not that you really can fail a language unless you give up, but yeah, you're basically teaching yourself that you are actually capable of this really, really advanced thing, and it's really, really good for you. As far as self-esteem goes, you just kind of feel proud of yourself because you've set yourself a goal and you've gone through with it. That's just self-esteem and confidence kind of go together. And another thing I'll say is your desire to improve as well. As soon as you've actually, not even before you finish learning a language, but definitely once you finish learning it, but also in the process of learning it, you realize that, oh yeah, I can actually learn things that I want to learn. There's nothing that's really off the table. If I want something, I can have it by putting in effort. And I think that's really good for people because a lot of people just have like a kind of defeatist fixed mindset where if they want something, they kind of have to just luckily stumble upon it. And that's certainly not true, particularly with language learning. So it is really good in the sense that you actually want to improve yourself further, which is fantastic. Self-improvement's fantastic. Everyone should be doing it, and very few people do. So yeah, those are a few of the benefits. And all of these things, I will say as well, are kind of, they are definitely sabotaged in the younger generation. So if you're, in your 20s or teens, I can't imagine anyone younger than that would be watching this video, but if you're in that kind of age group, you would have obviously noticed that your focus is probably quite poor because of social media. We generally have lower confidence as a generation, and I'd probably say we're less intelligent as well because we spend our time doing, kind of rubbish high dopamine tasks instead of reading, etc., and talking to people. So I would say these are all highly desirable traits, particularly for my generation that is probably more at the lower end of all of these things. And language learning really does help you with all of them, particularly the last one. That's why I've bolded it. The desire to improve is, I think, without that, you're kind of, you're going to have an interesting life if you don't actually want to improve as a person. I'll say that. So that is number one. It's a waste of time. It's certainly not a waste of time. That's absolute rubbish. Of course, if you're learning a language, you have no interest in going to that country and you hate the language, you'd still get these benefits, but maybe don't learn that language. But there is a language for everyone. You can learn an easy language like Italian. That was the first language I learned. And yeah, you will see these benefits. So don't think for a second that learning a language is a complete waste of time. You don't have to do it, but yeah, there are plenty of benefits. Number two, cheats and hacks. So this kind of ties into what I mentioned before with the kind of societal fixed mindset that you can't really make progress unless you're lucky or you kind of stumble upon progress. That, I think, does kind of represent a broader problem within society, and I like to call it the pill. It's basically the idea that there is some kind of magic pill or something, a kind of cheating, easy way to achieve a difficult goal. And if you kind of have to wrap your head around the idea that people are constantly looking for shortcuts and constantly looking for an easy way to do stuff. And I want you to actually think about kind of different things in society and how people constantly look for shortcuts, because it happens in everything. It happens on social media with money, with, physical health, with people trying to lose weight. They're constantly, sometimes it literally is a physical pill, like with some, side tangent, but with some weight loss stuff I've seen. But people literally look for this idea of the pill constantly, where they're trying to find an easy way to do stuff, a shortcut, instead of actually investing the time. And that's because we're basically weak as far as, self-improvement and learning and becoming better goes. So I want you to understand that there aren't really any cheats and hacks to language learning. There aren't really any secrets. The only secrets, I think, are things that are actually useful that people don't talk about, because they would rather talk about things that are supposedly going to teach you a language in 24 hours and that kind of rubbish. So there are no secrets to learning a language. Don't buy into any kind of nonsense about how you can learn a language in 10 seconds, etc. That's not true. We do talk about some kind of hacks and stuff on this channel, but when I say that, I'm basically meaning productivity hacks. I'm explaining things to you, like how to take new information like a foreign language and put it into your long-term memory. Things like that are actually useful and implementable. They're not nonsense, they're scientifically proven, and they're simply not discussed because most people are ignorant. Those are the only kind of hacks that exist. But I want you to understand that the only way to achieve a difficult goal like language learning is to invest in the process. You need to invest time, you need to invest effort. It's a difficult process, sure, but it is doable. And it's mostly difficult because it's time consuming and because it's new. It's not difficult in the sense that very few people are intelligent enough to learn a language. That's not true. I think the vast majority of people could easily learn 5 languages if they actually wanted to invest that much effort and they tried to. It's only once you start getting up to like 10, 15 languages that it's like, okay, there are going to be some people that it's not really going to be feasible for them to do that, just because, one, time constraints, obviously, but two, just because everyone's brain's a little bit different. But certainly you could learn easily multiple languages, easily trilingual for every single person. So don't think for a second that there is something stopping you. You just need to invest effort into the right teacher and, into yourself to actually become better, and the results will come. But yeah, that's number 2. Number 3, which is a thing that I think is every language learning YouTuber has done at least one video on this. I know I have. But the idea that all polyglots are scammers. This is an interesting one because it's not entirely untrue. There is some truth in it, and I'm going to explain that now. So if you think about it, the content on YouTube and any, social media directly reflects how we are as a society. So when we talked about, for example, cheats and hacks before, that is kind of manifests because we as a society are constantly looking for shortcuts and cheats and hacks. And so there is plenty of content on social media about that. If we weren't interested in that, that content would largely not exist, because creators, even myself included, I try and be as useful as possible, but obviously creators want views. It's nice to have subscribers and you want people watching your videos. So there's always going to be that incentive to make videos that get as many views as possible. And sometimes that means making videos on things that aren't necessarily true, which leads to this kind of problem of polyglots not necessarily being completely honest in their videos. So whether or not that means they don't speak the languages they claim, I haven't found that anyone's really, I'm sure they exist, but I haven't found anyone's like completely fudged the fact that they can speak a foreign language. I think a lot of the time they're kind of not really that good in the languages, and they claim to be fluent, or they claim to speak 10, but they're at different levels of proficiency in those languages, or they claim to learn a language from scratch and they actually already know. I think there was a video by Nathaniel Drew, not to shit on him, but he made a video on learning Italian in 24 hours or something like that. Sorry, it was learning Italian in like a short period of time, and he already spoke. He kind of talked about what he already knew, and it was very, very clear that he had a decent idea of Italian. Like, obviously he wasn't particularly good at it. He'd be nowhere near as good as me now, but he was able to put together basic sentences, and that might not seem like much to someone who doesn't speak a language watching that video, but as someone who has learned a language and as someone who speaks Italian, I can say that the fact that he was able to conjugate verbs flawlessly shows more than a beginner understanding of the language. And that is something that can kind of go over someone's head as a beginner language learner. But just understand that a lot of these people, when they make videos like learning a language in a week just to see how much I can learn, even if it's not complete horseshit and they already spoke the language, oftentimes they do have a bit of an advantage, because even if sometimes they already know bits of the language, other times they have an advantage in the fact that they know similar languages. So just be aware of that there are a lot of polyglots, even though a lot of language learning creators, even though they're not necessarily completely fudging the fact that they speak multiple languages, they're not entirely honest in their videos, because a video about how to learn a language in 24 hours gets way more views than how to learn a language in 3 years, even if, that's realistic if you're learning like an Asian language or something. So yeah, just be aware of that. A lot of the content is complete rubbish, and the best way to find accurate language learning content is to find a creator either that's a native speaker of the language you're learning, that teaches about that language, that is kind of making videos as you can kind of get an idea of it. An example in Italian would be Learning Italian with Lucrezia. Channels like that where they're basically making videos for learners because it's their passion and they like teaching, those kind of channels are really, really good. And if you want a hand finding them, comment below. And the other kind of channel you'd watch would be channels like this, where we don't focus on a particular language. I just kind of give advice on language learning in general and helping people. Channels like that are really good as well. Kind of steer clear of a lot of the channels where they're making videos on how to learn a language really, really fast and all that kind of stuff. Occasionally you do get a gem in a video that is useful, but yeah, it is kind of rare. And I think one more thing, because I'm going on a little bit, but one more thing I will address in this section is the fact that although I've made it all polyglots are scammers, obviously we've already discussed the fact that not all of them are scammers, but I think a lot of people have a very negative mindset towards progress, and they automatically assume that anyone who claims to be really good at something, like, obviously a polyglot is really good at speaking a bunch of languages, that they are automatically cheating or they're lying, etc. And this just isn't true. I think it's a protection mechanism where people don't like the idea that other people are better at them, because they have a fixed mindset and they think that if someone's better than them, they can never be at that level, and that they might as well, tear that person down or just assume that they're lying to make themselves feel better. And that's not true. Obviously there are plenty of, nonsense creators on the internet, but there are also plenty of really, really talented people that didn't just learn, 6 or 7 languages because they were lucky or because they were born into a family that spoke 6 or 7 languages. No, they know that many languages because they put in a lot of effort and they've become very talented as a result. And anyone can really do that. So yeah, don't think for a second that there is anything actually stopping you from learning a language, because there absolutely is. And make sure, if you are thinking things like that, just identify it as a protection mechanism and a part of your fixed mindset, and just get rid of it, because you really can learn a language and there are huge advantages to it. But yeah, that is basically the video, guys. If you want to check out my course I built, it's in the description below. Please subscribe as well, because I do put a lot of effort to help you guys for free. And yeah, thank you for watching. Have a good one.